In a marble-walled villa in Dubai's exclusive Nad Al Sheba district, renovation workers made a discovery that would expose the UAE's darkest secret about domestic workers. Hidden behind insulation in a servant's corridor, they found the skeleton of a 23-year-old woman who had vanished 2 years earlier. But this wasn't just another case of an absconded worker. This was evidence of a forbidden romance that turned deadly, revealing how power, obsession, and cruelty intersect in the shadows of Dubai's glittering facade. The bones belonged to Nura Aslam, a young Sri Lankan woman whose dreams of saving her family had led her into a nightmare from which there would be no escape. Behind Dubai's towering monuments to wealth lies a hidden workforce that keeps the Emirates' luxury machine running. Thousands of domestic workers from South Asia and Africa toil in private homes where cameras cannot follow, protected by a legal system that gives employers nearly absolute control over their workers' lives. Under this framework, employers hold their workers' passports, control their movement, and can cancel their visas at will. These young women disappear into marble mansions, cleaning crystal chandeliers and tending to families while their own families wait for money that often never comes. In the small fishing village of Kalutara, Sri Lanka, where coconut palms lean over narrow sandy streets and the morning air carries the salt scent of the Indian Ocean, Nura Aslam spent 23 years dreaming of a life beyond the poverty that gripped her family like a slowly tightening fist. The eldest of 5 siblings, she had learned early that dreams were luxuries her family couldn't afford. Her father's fishing boat, inherited from his grandfather, had been destroyed in the previous year's monsoon, leaving the family without their primary source of income. Her mother, Kamala, battled cervical cancer with treatments they could barely afford, making weekly trips to the hospital in Colombo that drained their savings 1 rupee at a time. Nura had been accepted to nursing school 3 years earlier, her examination scores high enough to earn a partial scholarship. But when her mother's diagnosis came, she had deferred enrollment year after year, working instead as a seamstress in a local garment factory for wages that barely covered her youngest brother's school fees. Neighbors described Nura as the girl who carried everyone's burdens, tutoring children for free when their parents couldn't afford extra lessons, caring for elderly relatives when their own families were overwhelmed, always putting others' needs before her own. She possessed a quiet strength that drew people to her, a way of listening that made others feel heard. The family's financial crisis reached a breaking point in March 2019 when the hospital demanded payment upfront for Kamala's next round of chemotherapy. The treatment would cost 75,000 rupees, more than her father earned in 6 months when the fishing was good. That night, as Kamala lay weakened by her illness and her younger siblings studied by candlelight to save electricity costs, Nura made a decision that would seal her fate. The family would sell their grandmother's gold necklace, a 22-carat heirloom that had been passed down through 3 generations. It was their last item of any value, kept for emergencies that seemed less important than keeping their mother alive. The necklace brought enough money to cover the medical bills and pay a recruitment agency in Colombo that promised to find Nura work in Dubai. The agent, a middle-aged man with gold teeth and a practiced smile, painted pictures of life in the Emirates that seemed too good to be true. Families that treated their workers like daughters, he assured them. Fair wages that would transform her family's circumstances forever. What Nura didn't know was that her age would be altered on the documents, her experience fabricated, and the contract she signed contained deductions that would reduce her actual wages to almost nothing. Her last morning in Kalutara dawned clear and humid, the kind of day when the air shimmers with heat even before sunrise. Her mother, despite her weakness, insisted on preparing Nura's favorite breakfast of string hoppers and coconut sambal. Her 4 younger siblings clung to her, making her promise to video call every week and send photos of the famous Dubai buildings they had seen in magazines. Her father, a man of few words worn smooth by years of hard labor and recent grief, pressed a small silver cross into her palm, his own father's, carried through decades of fishing on unpredictable seas. At the airport in Colombo, Nura carried a borrowed suitcase containing everything she owned. 3 cotton dresses, a pair of sandals, photographs of her family, and the silver cross that caught the light as she clutched it during takeoff. She pressed her face to the airplane window as Sri Lanka disappeared beneath the clouds, watching the island that held everything she loved grow smaller until it vanished into the endless blue of the Indian Ocean. The chauffeur who met her at Dubai International Airport wore dark sunglasses despite the terminal's artificial lighting and spoke not a word during the hour-long drive through streets that seemed paved with gold. Nura stared through tinted windows at towers that scraped the sky, roads wider than her entire village, cars that cost more than her family would earn in a lifetime. The Burj Khalifa rose before them like a modern Tower of Babel, its peak lost in the afternoon haze. When they finally stopped before gates that opened to reveal the marble-walled villa in Nad al-Sheba, Nura felt her heart racing with something between excitement and fear. She had arrived at what she believed would be her salvation, not knowing that behind those golden gates, fairy tales turned into nightmares. The last photo her family received showed her smiling uncertainly in front of the villa's ornate entrance, a young woman about to discover that even the most beautiful cages remain prisons. Sheikh Latif bin Malik arrived at his villa that evening in a black Mercedes S-Class, the kind of understated luxury that whispered rather than shouted about wealth. At 63, he carried himself with the calculated grace of old money, his tailored white dishdasher pressed to perfection, a Patek Philippe watch catching the light on his wrist, eyes that seemed to calculate the worth of everything they encountered. To Dubai's social elite, Latif was a pillar of respectability, a semi-retired logistics magnate whose shipping empire had made him an estimated $500 million, a cousin to the ruling family who appeared at the right galas and donated generously to the right causes. The newspapers loved photographing him at charity events, particularly those supporting women's empowerment and workers' rights. Just 6 months earlier, he had received an award from the Dubai Chamber of Commerce for his outstanding contributions to humanitarian causes. The irony was lost on everyone except those who worked in his home. Behind the public facade of philanthropy lurked a man whose private appetites had consumed 3 marriages and countless domestic workers. His first 2 wives had been relocated abroad, after what his lawyers delicately termed irreconcilable differences, though both had left Dubai with substantial financial settlements and ironclad non-disclosure agreements. What the newspapers never reported was Latif's villa's extraordinary staff turnover rate, over 300% annually, a revolving door of domestic workers who arrived with hope and left broken, deported, or simply disappeared. Complaints filed with authorities had a peculiar way of vanishing from official records, helped along by Latif's extensive connections within Dubai's police force and immigration services. His reputation remained spotless because he had made spotlessness profitable for everyone who mattered. Standing beside him in the villa's marble foyer was his current wife, Salwa, a 48-year-old former model from Lebanon whose beauty had aged into something sharper and more calculating. She had been Latif's second wife for 12 years, long enough to understand that survival in his world required abandoning any illusions about love or partnership. Salwa had learned that in wealthy Emirati households, power was finite. The more she shared, the less she possessed. Her role had evolved from decorative spouse to chief enforcer, the velvet glove hiding Latif's iron fist. She protected his image with the same ruthless efficiency that she protected her own position, understanding that they weren't partners but co-conspirators in maintaining an empire built on fear. Salwa's cruelty was calculated rather than passionate, a series of strategic moves designed to eliminate threats to her security. She had watched Latif's obsessions with young domestic workers before, and she had developed systems for managing them that kept his appetite satisfied while preserving her status as the villa's undisputed queen. The villa itself was a monument to excess disguised as taste, 15,000 square feet of Italian marble and Austrian crystal, Persian rugs worth $50,000 each, and smart home technology that would have impressed a tech billionaire. Motion sensors tracked movement through every room, cameras hidden in crown molding recorded conversations, and automated locks could seal any door at the touch of a smartphone app. The main house showcased Latif's wealth with the subtlety of a museum exhibition, each room carefully curated to demonstrate his sophisticated taste and unlimited resources. But hidden behind the main structure, accessible only through a service corridor that guests never saw, lay the servants' quarters, a different world entirely. Here, luxury gave way to utilitarian efficiency. No windows faced the street where neighbors might glimpse the staff's living conditions. The rooms were small, poorly ventilated, and designed for maximum occupancy rather than comfort. Nura's accommodation was the most cramped of all, a converted supply closet measuring 4 feet by 6 feet, just large enough for a thin mattress on the tile floor and a plastic bucket that served multiple purposes. The temperature in these quarters regularly reached 95 degrees during Dubai's summer months, with no air conditioning and minimal ventilation. The villa's security extended beyond comfort into complete control. 12-foot walls topped with razor wire surrounded the property. Guards monitored the single entrance around the clock, and no staff member could leave without explicit permission. Cell phone jammers in the servant areas ensured that communication with the outside world remained impossible, a technological prison as effective as any physical bars. Nura's daily routine began at 4:30 each morning when she prepared breakfast for a family that wouldn't acknowledge her existence. From 6 in the morning until 11 at night, she moved through an endless cycle of tasks, cleaning 8 marble bathrooms to spotless perfection, ironing 30 or more pieces of clothing daily, preparing elaborate meals for Latif's business dinners and Salwa's social gatherings. Her hands, soft from her previous work as a seamstress, began to crack and bleed from industrial cleaning chemicals applied without protective gloves. Latif's first act of control came during her second day, when he summoned her to his study and extended his hand. "Your passport," he said simply, his tone suggesting this was routine procedure. "For your safety. Dubai can be dangerous for young women alone." The document disappeared into his personal safe, along with her return ticket and any hope of leaving without his permission. Sleep became a luxury measured in hours rather than comfort. The villa's demands left her with 4 hours of rest on good nights, often less when Latif entertained or Salwa decided the marble floors needed additional attention. By the end of her first month, Nura had lost 12 pounds from a combination of inadequate food, physical exhaustion, and the constant stress of living under surveillance. The pattern that would ultimately destroy her began emerging in her second week, when Latif started offering what he called compliments about her appearance. By the third week, his instructions were accompanied by unnecessary physical contact, a hand on her shoulder that lingered too long, fingers that brushed hers when she served his tea. The fourth week brought late-night summons to his study, ostensibly to serve refreshments but increasingly to endure his scrutiny. Salwa watched these developments with the cold assessment of a predator recognizing competition. She began monitoring every interaction between Latif and Nura, warning other staff members against befriending the new girl. "You're lucky to be here," she told Nura during one of her early encounters, her voice carrying the undertone of threat that would become familiar. "Girls like you disappear in Dubai every day." The transformation in Sheikh Latif's behavior began with subtle kindness that felt like sunlight after months of shadows. During her second month, he started appearing in doorways while she worked, watching her with what seemed like genuine interest rather than the cold assessment she had grown accustomed to. "You're different from the others, Nura," he told her one evening as she cleaned his study, his voice carrying a warmth that made her pause in confusion. "There's something special about you, an intelligence in your eyes that the others lacked." These moments of apparent recognition felt like lifelines to a drowning woman. When he learned about her mother's cancer, Latif's expression softened with what appeared to be sincere concern. "I could help your family," he offered, leaning against his mahogany desk as she dusted its surface. "Send more money. Get your mother better treatment. The best doctors in Colombo, private rooms, experimental therapies that could save her life." The promises hung in the air like golden threads, each one more tempting than the last. The gifts began appearing in her closet, delicate silk scarves in colors that complemented her complexion, jewelry that caught the light when she moved, perfumes that smelled of jasmine and rose. Each item came with specific instructions. The emerald earrings were to be worn only when serving his dinner, the blue scarf only when cleaning his private quarters. "These are for our special moments," he explained, his fingers lingering as he fastened a gold bracelet around her wrist. "Never remove them. They're symbols of how much you mean to me." When Salwa traveled to Lebanon to visit her family, Latif's behavior escalated into what he called their private dinners. He would summon Nura to his study at night, where he had prepared elaborate meals that she was expected to share with him. During these evenings, he spoke of his loneliness, his disappointment in previous marriages, and his search for genuine connection. He showed her photographs of other domestic workers who had, according to him, found happiness through his special attention. "Look at Priya," he said, pointing to a smiling young woman in expensive clothes standing beside a luxury car. "She's married now, living in Canada with her own family. I made that possible because she understood our special relationship. Most disturbingly, he began telling Nura that she reminded him of his first love, a Lebanese woman he had met during his university years in Beirut. Amora had your eyes, he would say, his gaze growing distant and hungry. The same way of moving, the same grace. I lost her because I was young and foolish. I won't make that mistake again. The comparison felt like a noose tightening around her neck, transforming her into a replacement for a ghost from his past. Nura found herself trapped in an impossible position that grew more suffocating each day. Her mother's condition was deteriorating according to the sparse communications she received, and her family desperately needed the additional money Latif promised. She was completely isolated from any support system, with no friends, no allies, and no way to contact the outside world without his permission. Her legal status remained entirely dependent on his sponsorship, making resistance feel like signing her own deportation order. The first assault came during her 3rd month, beginning as forced handholding during their dinners that escalated when she tried to pull away. Your mother needs medicine, doesn't she? Latif whispered when she resisted, his grip tightening until her fingers went numb. Your sisters need school fees. Your family needs you to be cooperative. The threats were delivered in the same gentle tone he used for his false kindness, making them more terrifying than if he had shouted. The psychological breakdown began almost immediately. Nura stopped eating regularly, her appetite disappearing under the weight of constant anxiety. Sleep became impossible in her cramped closet, every sound making her freeze with terror that Latif was coming for her. She began talking to herself in whispered Sinhala, holding conversations with her mother and sisters that existed only in her imagination, desperate to maintain some connection to the person she had been before entering this marble prison. Salwa's discovery of the gifts triggered a retaliation that revealed the full extent of her calculated cruelty. She found the jewelry hidden beneath Nura's mattress during a surprise inspection, her face transforming into something cold and predatory. The beating that followed was administered with a designer stiletto, each blow precise and purposeful. Don't think you're special, Salwa hissed as Nura curled into herself on the floor. You're a cleaning girl, a servant, and I'll make sure you disappear like the others if you ever forget your place. The punishment escalated into systematic torture designed to break her spirit completely. Food was restricted to 1 meal per day, served with deliberate ceremony to emphasize her dependence. She was locked in her closet for 48 hours without food or water, forced to use the bucket while hallucinating from dehydration. Most humiliatingly, during one of Latif's business dinners, she was forced to clean the guest bathrooms with her bare hands while prominent Dubai businessmen watched and laughed. But the most insidious aspect of her torment was how Latif and Salwa began working together, presenting a united front that made escape seem impossible. They perfected a good cop, bad cop routine that left Nura constantly off balance. I'm trying to protect you from her anger, Latif would whisper after Salwa's beatings. But you must show me that you're grateful for my protection. Meanwhile, Salwa would appear during his absence with false sympathy. Only I can save you from his desires. But you must prove your loyalty to me first. The other workers in the villa carried their own stories of survival and complicity. Sila, the Kenyan housekeeper who had endured 8 years in the house, had witnessed 12 girls come and go. They burned the last girl's passport in front of us, she told Nura during a rare moment alone. In the villa's garden, she showed Nura a hidden shrine, for small stones arranged beneath a jasmine bush, each representing a girl who had disappeared. We remember them this way, Sila whispered. It's all we can do. Yamis, the Pakistani driver, warned Nura about the futility of seeking help from authorities. The Sheikh's cousin is a high-ranking police official, he explained while loading groceries. Every complaint disappears. Every investigation stops. The smart ones stop fighting and just survive. His words carried the weight of someone who had watched too many tragedies unfold without intervention. Despite the overwhelming odds, Nura began documenting her abuse and planning resistance. She smuggled a letter to her family through a sympathetic grocery delivery driver, but the message was intercepted before reaching Sri Lanka, and the driver was immediately deported. Her first escape attempt during the family's absence was foiled by security cameras that tracked her to the gate, resulting in 72 hours locked in her closet without food or water. Yet she persisted, hiding a written diary beneath a loose floorboard, recording her injuries with a small mirror from a makeup compact, and creating detailed maps of the villa with potential escape routes. Each act of resistance was a declaration that some part of her remained unbroken, even as Latif's final ultimatum loomed: complete submission to his desires in exchange for the money that might save her mother's life. Latif's obsession with Nura evolved from calculated manipulation into something far more dangerous: genuine delusion. By her 4th month in the villa, he had installed a hidden camera in her closet, watching her sleep through a live feed on his phone during business meetings. His control extended to selecting her clothes each morning, laying out specific combinations that pleased his aesthetic sensibilities. The emerald dress for Mondays, the cream-colored abaya for Fridays, each outfit chosen to fulfill his fantasy of the perfect companion. Their nightly dinners became mandatory rituals where Nura was forced to sit across from him in his study, pretending to enjoy meals while he spoke of his day, his dreams, and increasingly, his plans for their future together. "You understand me in ways Solwa never could," he would tell her, his eyes bright with the fervor of a man who had convinced himself that fear was affection. He began introducing her to business associates as his beautiful young companion, showing photographs of her in the jewelry he had given her, describing their romance with the pride of a man displaying a prized possession. The expensive perfumes he bought her, Chanel, Tom Ford, rare fragrances that cost more than her family's monthly income, became another form of ownership. Each scent was applied under his supervision, each bottle a marker of his possession. "This jasmine reminds me of Lebanese gardens," he would murmur, dabbing the perfume behind her ears with fingers that lingered too long. "You smell like happiness now." Nura developed survival strategies that allowed her mind to escape even when her body could not. During his assaults, she learned to dissociate, sending her consciousness to the fishing boats of Kalutara while her physical form endured his attention. She pretended compliance with increasing sophistication, offering smiles that masked her planning, responding to his endearments while mapping escape routes in her mind. Most importantly, she began studying Arabic through overheard conversations, understanding for the first time the full scope of their discussions about her fate. The call that changed everything came on a Tuesday morning in her 5th month. Latif, in a rare gesture of apparent kindness, allowed her to speak with her family. Her youngest sister's voice, small and broken, delivered the news that shattered her world. Their mother had died 3 days earlier, succumbing to the cancer that Nura's wages were supposed to help treat. She had never received enough money for proper treatment, never got to say goodbye, never knew whether her eldest daughter was safe or suffering. Latif's response to her grief revealed the full extent of his manipulation. "I'm so sorry for your loss," he said, his arms encircling her as she sobbed. "Let me help. I'll pay for an elaborate funeral, the best that Kalutara has ever seen. Your mother will be honored like a queen." The offer came with an explicit price: gratitude expressed through physical submission. "I'm the only family you have now," he whispered into her hair. "Let me take care of you the way a man should take care of the woman he loves." But grief had transformed Nura in ways Latif couldn't comprehend. The desperate young woman who had arrived seeking salvation was gone, replaced by someone with nothing left to lose. She stopped pretending gratitude, stopped smiling when he entered rooms, stopped participating in the elaborate charade of their relationship. Her defiance was quiet but unmistakable, a coldness in her eyes that even Solwa noticed. This change triggered a dangerous evolution in the villa's power dynamics. Latif had convinced himself that Nura's grief was simply a barrier to their happiness that time would heal. He began consulting lawyers about formalizing Nura's status as his 3rd wife, researching the procedures for arranging a proper Islamic marriage while maintaining his existing relationship with Solwa. In his delusion, this would be the perfect solution. Solwa would retain her position as senior wife, while Nura would become his beloved younger bride. "It's actually ideal," he told his lawyer confidently. "Solwa can focus on social obligations while Nura provides the companionship I truly need." But Solwa realized that becoming a co-wife would be far worse than being replaced entirely. As the senior wife, she would be expected to accept and even mentor Nura, watching daily as Latif lavished attention on his new bride while taking her own position for granted. "He wants to make that village girl my equal," She confided to her sister during a phone call that Nura overheard while cleaning. "I won't share my home, my status, or my husband with some desperate servant." The prospect of permanent co-wife status filled Salwa with a rage that made her previous cruelty seem restrained. She began planning not just to eliminate the threat, but to ensure that no other young woman would ever again challenge her position in Latif's affections. Nura recognized the narrowing window of her survival and made a desperate gambit. She began pretending to accept Latif's vision of their future, allowing him to believe that grief was softening her resistance. "Maybe you're right," she told him one evening, the words like ash in her mouth. "Maybe we could build something together." Her apparent capitulation gave her access to information about his schedule, his security arrangements, and most importantly, his plans to relocate her to a more isolated property where escape would become impossible. Through Sila, she made contact with an underground network of activists who helped trafficked workers escape. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. During the upcoming Eid celebration, when security would be relaxed and the household distracted, Yamis would drive her to a safe house where international advocates waited to document her story and arrange safe passage home. But Yamaza's loyalty had always been for sale to the highest bidder. The promised reward of 50,000 dirhams proved more compelling than Nura's desperate pleas for help. He confessed the entire plan to Latif the night before its execution, providing details of every contact and every preparation. When Nura crept toward the garden gate during the celebration, Salwa was waiting in the shadows, her smile cold with triumph. The confrontation that followed in Latif's study became a three-way battle for Nura's fate. Salwa demanded that the problem be handled permanently, her voice sharp with years of suppressed jealousy and fear. Latif, torn between his obsession and his wounded pride at what he saw as betrayal, wavered between rage and desperate pleading. And Nura, with nothing left to lose, made her final threat. She would expose everything to international media, naming every official who had taken bribes, every authority who had turned away, every crime committed within these marble walls. The room fell silent as the three of them realized that they had reached the point where words would no longer suffice, where the carefully maintained balance of power and fear was about to collapse into violence that would leave only one of them standing. The final confrontation erupted in Latif's study as the three of them faced the inevitable conclusion of months of manipulation, obsession, and fear. Latif paced behind his mahogany desk, torn between his delusional love and his wounded pride. "You betrayed me," he said, his voice breaking. "After everything I offered you, everything I promised your family. I thought we had something real." Salwa stood rigid near the door, her ultimatum hanging in the air like a blade. "Choose now, Latif. Her or me. I won't share you with this ungrateful servant any longer." Her voice carried the cold finality of someone who had calculated every possible outcome and found only one acceptable solution. Nura, backed against the wall with nowhere left to run, found strength in her desperation. "I'd rather die than live as your prisoner," she said, her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. "You can kill me, but you'll never own me, and the world will know what monsters you really are." The argument escalated with frightening speed. Latif lunged toward Nura, perhaps to embrace her, perhaps to silence her threats. Salwa moved faster, her hand finding the heavy crystal paperweight that had sat on his desk for years, a gift from some forgotten business deal, now transformed into a weapon. The first blow caught Nura at the temple, sending her sprawling across the Persian rug. As Nura struggled to rise, blood streaming down her face, Latif's internal struggle collapsed into rage. His participation sealed her fate. Together, they ensured that the girl who had come seeking a better life died at 11:47 p.m. on a Friday in February, her dreams buried beneath marble and lies. The cover-up began immediately with the efficiency of practiced criminals. Nura's body was moved to the servant corridor where construction had recently begun on additional storage. By morning, a fresh wall had been built, hiding the evidence behind new insulation and paint. Salwa burned Nura's belongings in the garden incinerator, watching smoke carry away the last traces of a life that had briefly threatened her security. The official story was filed with police within hours. Another absconded worker who had fled in the night, probably returning to Sri Lanka illegally. Latif's cousin, a high-ranking police official, ensured the investigation remained perfunctory. The remaining staff received clear warnings about the consequences of speaking to authorities, with deportation papers prepared for anyone who seemed unreliable. In Kalutara, Nura's family filed desperate missing person reports when her promised phone calls stopped coming. The Sri Lankan embassy initially offered assistance, but their efforts mysteriously stalled as diplomatic channels were quietly influenced. International workers' rights groups eventually took up the case, but their investigations hit walls of bureaucratic obstruction and official denial. Meanwhile, Latif and Salwa maintained their public personas with renewed vigor. They donated generously to women's shelters, attended charity galas for missing persons awareness, and Latif even gave interviews about empowering domestic workers. The irony was lost on audiences who saw only a wealthy couple committed to humanitarian causes. Life in the villa continued normally over Nura's hidden grave. New domestic workers were hired and, when they proved troublesome, disappeared in similar patterns. The underground network of activists helping trafficked workers grew in response, but they could only save those who managed to escape before it was too late. 2 years later, the villa was sold to new owners who wanted extensive renovations. Construction crews gutting the servant quarters found human remains behind a false wall. Dental records confirmed what activists had long suspected. Nura Aslam, age 23, had never left Dubai alive. Forensics revealed blunt force trauma to the skull, and DNA evidence linked both Latif and Salwa to the crime scene. But justice proved as elusive as freedom had been for Nura. Latif's political connections activated immediately, key witnesses suddenly left the country, and crucial evidence mysteriously disappeared from police stations. His lawyers crafted elaborate theories about rogue employees and jealous housekeepers, while Salwa's legal team blamed everyone except their clients. A quiet financial settlement compensated Nura's family, though no amount could restore their daughter or ease their guilt. Latif and Salwa relocated to Switzerland, where their wealth opened doors that their crimes had closed in Dubai. The case was officially closed with insufficient evidence, another example of how money and influence could bury truth along with bodies.